Okay. Well, the thing I want to talk to you about
Yes.
is cinema. Because Lenin, once he sees cinema, considers the most important art. And he immediately combines cinema and ideology. And we see in a particular part of history cinema, there were many, Hitler's films about, great ideological presentation through cinema. There were Soviet cinema, there were Hollywood cinema, and of course, talking about very recent history of cinema, the latest movie, Life of Pi, it's become a popular, especially in China. Why?
I would say because people, they like to see images that reflect concepts that are in their hearts.
That's a very interesting point. Can you reveal something?
Well, we're always, the heart, we could say in this sense, is the subjective realm, and what we see, objective. And we're forever trying to take what's in the heart out into the objective world. Actually, really, we want to live in the subjective world, but we find ourselves in the objective world. And that's why people, not only the Chinese, but everybody, they like to go to movies and immerse themselves in an experience. It's like you're taken away from the objective world for some time and you enter another world. And you're voyeuristically envisioning yourself through the characters there. And I mean, that's in a simple way. That's part of what people do through media, but there may be more profound implications about that also.
Can you bring a little light on that?
Well, it has to do with our ultimate aspiration and also what separates human beings from animals. Right? We're riveted to story. We're hardwired for story. That's why to this day, what's been handed down in time, when we say story, we mean a narrative about who are people, what is our purpose, what is our prospect or our possibility. And different stories speak to that. That's why human beings are storytellers. Animals are not storytellers. Right? Someone will try to say, no, but dogs, they dream about catching, cats, or cats dream about catching mice. That's another thing. Dealing with base necessities, eating, sleeping, sex, defense. Human beings, they're interested in story that speaks to their heart and their identity potential.
Well, it's a very interesting point. So when we look at the religious realm,
yes,
Bible, Vedas,
right, all stories.
It's the stories, but in modern world,
replaced by different stories.
Right. So what's
and what and you're talking about movies. So what was popular at one point were Star Wars. Let's go back to that. It's still everyone knows what Star Wars is. And we saw, or the media observed, a almost religious-like following of those who were the devotees of it. And what was it about? The Force and the dark side and the good side, these very basic things that human beings deal with, good nature, bad nature. So some people will make the argument that these religious stories that you have in the various scriptures, in time, philosophers tried to translate that into something else, science came along, but still you have filmmakers of the 20th century presenting these basic story models that some people will sometimes attribute to the Greeks, saying there's only 5, 6, 7 stories that you can tell. It's these same stories being reworked in different ways, and people still find them fascinating because it speaks to their inner aspirations.
What is the difference between mundane story, which is very touchy and divine story, which is like...
Well, that's a good point. And we can say this. If you look at the structure of Vedic literature, Amnai, revealed truth, particularly the Puranas, you have 3 divisions of Puranas that sometimes tell the same story. So you have Puranas in Tamagun for people in the mode of ignorance, Puranas in Rajagun, passion, and Sattvagun. So they tell the same story a little differently with different emphasis points according to the intended audience. Someone will point out, for example, the Nrsingadev pastime, Prahlad Nrsingadev. In the Rajasic Purana, there'll be elaborate descriptions of fight scenes, armor, those kind of things. If we look to the Bhagavad Purana, which is not merely Sattvagun, but is Nirgun, right? It's described as the Amala Purana. Right? The emphasis is on philosophy. The minimum is placed upon descriptions about battles and things like that, and fights. That's the minimum. And what do we come away with? The maximum is the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj, his prayers to Nrsingadev, the prayers of the Devatas to Nrsingadev. So, and we're told, and what is the Bhagavad Purana? Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam. This doesn't have any mundane reference point. If you think it does, you're not perceiving it properly. It's not, it doesn't have as a reference point the mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, or even the mode of goodness, really. It's what? Nirgun. That's why Sukadev was selected. No mundane reference point. Just a pure medium for expression of higher truth. And what is the purpose of the Bhagavatam? What is the purpose of telling the story of Prahlad Maharaj? That Sanatana Goswami is called the Bhakti Siddhanta Acharya, where Rupa Goswami is the Rasa Acharya. Sanatana Goswami Prabhu, we have to, give extra praise. And he's the Bhakti Siddhanta Acharya. He's going to tell us philosophically what is to be understood. So in his book, Brihad Bhagavatamritam, what we might not perceive the structure of Srimad Bhagavatam. In Brihad Bhagavatamritam, Sanatana Goswami Prabhu, he's telling us what's the position of Prahlad, where is Shiva, where's Brahma, what is Karma Misra Bhakti, what is Jnana Misra Bhakti, what is Shuddha Bhakti. And on this point, we have to say something about Mahadev Shiva, because of his greatness and also unique position. That sometimes Guru Maharaj will say there's, Bhoga Shiv, Tyaga Shiv, and Bhakta Shiv. And I say Shiv because I'm just remembering once I was in this, we were having a preaching party in India, one town called Meerut, another one called Bareilly. And I'd be going by in the rickshaw, keeping different appointments, doing some Harikatha, some collection. And this one Shivite, he was a little enamored seeing some Westerner in, the Vedic dress or the dress of a brahmachari. And I'd be going by in the rickshaw, always had to go in front of him. He was like in front of a banyan tree, right? But with a little platform doing something. But whenever I'd go by, he'd go, Shiv, 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 Shiv. That's like, Shiv, 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 Shiv. So I couldn't tell if he was trying to purify me or he thought my appearance was auspicious.
Or maybe he just expressed himself in an artistic way. You just said very interesting.
But wait, just to finish that. So, we're told, Bhoga Shiv, Tyaga Shiv, Bhakta Shiv. As Bhoga Shiv, Maya is his consort. Right? Shiva is not under the influence of Maya. Maya is his consort, right, who's putting everybody else into illusion. And we're told, similar to the mentality of women sometimes, if she feels she's being neglected by Shiva, she will try and catch his attention in different ways. Right? But she failed to put him into illusion. Right? So sometimes he's known as Dhira, the example of Dhira, meaning sober, undisturbed, not under the influence of the senses. So Guru Maharaj made this point that we just posted. He said, we are all Shiva, atomic Shivas, where I inserted the word wannabes. We want to be like Shiva, meaning we want that Maya will serve us, that Maya will be our consort. And again, Sanatana Goswami Prabhu deals with that in Brihad Bhagavatamritam. So when the jiva is about to leave the material world, he's gone through the 8 layers of he's in the last layer, he's on his way out of the material world, that Maya comes before him in a very charming form, beautiful, sweet, seductive, charming, and says, why are you going? And he's thinking, well, you know, suffering and illusion and the world, and I'm through with that. And she goes, yes, but that was because you were under my control. But now I'm offering myself to you. You'll be Shiva and I'll be your consort. And Guru Maharaj, he described this as, he said, the last sweet bullet enters the brain. Like, really? I'll be Shiva and you'll be my consort? Yeah.
Well, it's very,
But, see, this is a very delicate point, because we'll say that is the aspiration of so-called Shaivites or Shaktas and so on. But Bhaktivinoda Thakur deals with this very nicely in Jaiva Dharma, where in one of the discussions, one of the, maybe Paramahansa Babaji or someone, or Vaishnava Das, he said, let me understand you properly. You're saying that when the jiva soul is conditioned, a conditioned soul, that Maya is Ma, means mother, like Jai Ma Kali, Ma Durga, right? He said, and you're saying, but when jiva becomes liberated, then he becomes Shiva, and his mother becomes his consort? So that's how Bhaktivinoda Thakur deals with that point. It's almost, I mean, not only, it's mildly humorous. He says, so you're when you're a liberated soul, then your mother becomes your wife? So that's that Bhoga Shiv, then Tyaga Shiv, in the interim position, just as, like sometimes people would say to Guru Maharaj, oh well, Shiva, it says Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu. It's the best of the Vaishnavas. Guru Maharaj would say, that is for propaganda. He said, his location in the middle position. Haven't you read Brihad Bhagavatamritam? Where Brahma, Karma Misra Brahma, when he is asked, he is told, you're Atmabhu, born from the Lord's navel. No mundane mother or father, because before that, Vaman, Indra was being praised, that Vaman's your family member, Vaman Dev. Anyway, and Brahma's saying, oh, actually, I'm so busy managing this world, I don't have time for my mantra and my japa. I'm so busy managing. He said, but Shiva, he lives underneath, we hear in the Bhagavatam, what is that? A banyan tree is 800 miles wide, and it's very quiet. And he's there without a stitch. Like Sukadev, we're told, what was Sukadev wearing, according to the Bhagavatam? What does it say? Digambara. This is the beauty of written by Vedavas and others, saying he was wearing the 10 directions. That's how it says. It doesn't say he was naked. It says, Digambara. He was dressed in all the directions. That's a more beautiful way of saying that. So similarly, Shiva's in that position. So from Brahma Loka, Biroja, to Shiva Loka, but it's still below Vaikuntha Loka. So Tyaga Shiva. But and when Shiva is praised, as we told there, Narada's praising him, how great he is, and he's saying, no, sometimes I have to act against the Lord. I'm giving these assignments, like as Shankara preaching Mayavad, deluding jivas. It's also mentioned by Guru Maharaj that Shambhu, Shiva, he's the sum total of all jivas. Right? So we hear in Brahma Samhita, Vishnu cannot have any direct contact with Maya. So out of the side, his Yoga Nidra means half asleep, his glance, just his peripheral vision, glances toward Maya, and the glance personifies as Shambhu. And within him are all jiva souls. And then Shambhu impregnates all the jivas into the womb of Prakriti, who supplies all their different forms. So anyway, that position. But then above that, what about Bhakta Shiva? So when Srila Gurudev made the Sada Shiva, the Shiva temple, was very careful to give the name Gangadhar Sada Shiva. Gangadhar, reminding the footwater of Vishnu is taking on his head as worshipable. And Sadashiva, meaning Bhakta Shiva of the Vaikuntha world. And higher, we know in terms of Guru Maharaj will tell us, gods, they have some play in Vrindavan to keep things interesting. Brahma, Shiva. But when Shiva wants to really participate in those pastimes, then we have Gopeshwar. Right? But only Shiva has these three positions of Bhoga Shiva, Tyaga Shiva, Bhakta Shiva. And sometimes we're told also Advaita Acharya, sometimes described as Mahavishnu, sometimes as Shiva. And if we understand the intimate relationship between Mahavishnu and Shiva, that makes sense.
Well, it's a very interesting point of view.
Oh, and just to finish, so Shiva, he deflected the praise of Narada and told, when he said that, I'm so shameless, I wanted to be greater than my Lord. Right? But Sanatana Goswami explains, what does that mean? Who's greater than Krishna? The devotees. So he's saying he wanted to be a devotee, but he made it sound like he was asking for something undesirable. But that Shiva, he says, I rather appreciate Prahlad. And that's why Prahlad occupies that position specifically in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the beginning of Shuddha Bhakti. When he says the Nasabritya Sabai Banik, when Nrsingadeva is offering, whatever boon you like, Prahlad, you take. And he's hurt. He said, do you think I worshipped you to get a boon from you? Like a businessman, some business exchange. That's why it's the beginning of Shuddha Bhakti. No anticipation of reward, remuneration, that kind of thing. So Srimad Bhagavatam again, Amala Purana. There's nothing in this Purana that will, that has any connection with the modes of nature.
Going back to the original topic of this discussion, there's ways of different styles of art to represent certain concepts. In previous ages, Vedic sages were speaking. Then they start writing. Then we'd see that images, the pictures appear on sculpture and frescoes and bas-reliefs
Yes.
And it seems like now is the age of multimedia and moving pictures, animation, animated comics, advertising. So, considering all these new ways to represent different concepts to people and people's ability to connect and reciprocate with them.
Mm-hmm.
So, how would be modern way of represent those concepts be appropriate?
I'm reminded of when some devotees, they wanted to make some deities, Krishna, Balaram, and Subal and Sridham. So they're asking Srila Guru Maharaj, how should we show Krishna, Balaram? We have some idea, famous temple, but how should we show Subal and Sridham? And Guru Maharaj said, they should be shown ready to fulfill the inner desire of Krishna. And they looked at themselves like, all right, but how should they be? What should their posture be? He said, they should be shown ready to fulfill the inner desire of Krishna. And then finally, when they pressed about, but what would be their posture? And Guru Maharaj said, that an artist can decide. So when we see pictures or images of divine forms, we're warned against thinking that they're accurate representations of divine form. What we're getting is an artist's imagination. What is that artist's devotional qualification? Is unknown. Right? So, for example, Saraswati Thakur, when it came to chanting Krishna Nam, he did not advise one, look at a picture of Krishna and chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Many devotees think they should do that. They think, oh, that'll be good. I'm taking Krishna Nam and looking at a picture of Krishna, or Radhan Krishna, or that'll be helpful. That'll remind me of the divine form of Krishna. He told the opposite of that. He said, the senses are like vultures, and they're, in other words, we're subjective agents. This is the objective world. He said, they're going to turn the image of Krishna into vulture food. What they want, what is their idea. They're looking for some objective representation of subjective reality. And it's the opposite of that. That's why we'll notice when we observe deities, we go to India and they'll say, this is a self-manifested deity. Say, we look at Radha Raman. We'll say, oh, anatomically, Radha Raman is an exaggeration. A very thin one, very broad shoulders, but everyone will say, such a beautiful deity, small and very powerful, right? But not anatomically correct to the extreme. The hands, the form, as we told the other day, we don't portray gods with muscles. Human beings have muscles, which are a result of flesh and bone. Gods do not have muscles. They don't need them. It's not a product of subtle forms. Muscularity, that's a fleshy consideration. So when it comes to how these forms appear, will manifest, it's according to divine will. Even from an artistic point of view, we visited the Vatican, and there they have the Pieta of Michelangelo. Mary, after Christ has been taken down from the cross, she's holding Christ on her lap. So people, it's considered a masterpiece. But in analysis, from an analytical point of view, they've measured Mary is much larger than Jesus. if you get out a tape measure and measure her, like very much larger than him, which is, from an objective point of view, not true. But when this is put together, it's conveying some sort of subjective reality that everyone finds overwhelming. And the objective flaws, if you want to call them, are not a factor to the subjective aspect coming through. Right? So when we deal with any particular art form, we have to be very careful about that, because people will think, as they asked Srila Prabhupada when he had an art department, they'd say, Srila Prabhupada, does Krishna really look like this? And once he said, you know, not exactly, but you'll recognize him when you see him. So he, seeing that the people had no idea what is the form of Krishna and all of these things, started an art department to do artistic representations of that. We just have to remember, that's what it is. It's an artist's conception.
Well, I found in your explanation very deep meaning, but from another point, it looks like a little bit of contradiction of what most people believe about divinity, because they believe that through art you can achieve some kind of a divine form, and some people say, you know, specifically in Vedic culture, that divine form can be achieved through particular sound, vibration. So can you really explain how divinity descends and how it takes different shapes and forms?
Yes, so Guru Maharaj gives as a principle, a Hegelian principle. Reality exists for itself and by itself. And this is congruous with what's expressed in the Upanishads, where it says, Tasyesha Atma Vivinute Tena Labhyas Tanum Swam. He will reveal himself according to his own necessity. And that's the point I was making, why the deity of Radha Raman, if we say, well, if this is a self-manifesting deity, but it's not, from external point of view, 100% anatomically correct, how is that possible? Then it indicates the sweet will of Krishna. He decided to appear that way, in that particular form, as we see in the Jagannath deity. Right? Someone made a murti of Srila Guru Maharaj after his disappearance, and the devotees were not happy with the artist's representation. And they looked to Srila Gurudev for some adjustment. And Gurudev, with his profound humor and as a means of pointing to an ontological truth, he said, if Jagannath is Krishna, then this deity is Guru Maharaj.
Well,
so,
still.
all right, so, but my point is, so when you're dealing with subjective expression in the objective world, we will say, as a general rule, it has to be descending from up to down, not the inverse, that we're trying to go from down to up. We're trying to reconfigure matter or media in a particular way to generate spiritual substance. That's the opposite. Right? And that will generally come under the heading of what we call Prakrita Sahajism or imitationism. Thinking we can reconfigure matter to generate something spiritual. The inverse, or what we strive for, is descending, that some divine inspiration will come down and manipulate the media. Just as Kaviraj Goswami is saying, I can't see and I'm arthritic. He's in his 90s. He's saying, but some divine power has come down and is moving my hand, and miraculously I'm writing this Chaitanya Charitamritam. Right? You know, so that this is at the basis of anything that's pure and substantial, that something higher is descending.
What I can say, possible, very much possible, that the same conversation going on right now in between some art group where they say that there are true art which is descending.
Right.
And
the artist is an instrument for expression.
Right. And most of the popular art which people are taking wrongly, it's imitation, or maybe good imitation or bad imitation of a true descending process. So we can say an art world always has a fight, internal fight, which is going on between the guys who can come up with original stuff and people who's trying to.
Well, and there was a movement called art for art's sake, right? In the, whenever it was, 19th century or whatever. And as we've mentioned, the picture of Dorian Gray, the introduction, Oscar Wilde makes many observations about art. One, and he concludes with this statement, all art is quite useless. And naturally, being a wit, some people, they thought, they took it at face that he's saying it's of no value. That's not what he was saying. When he said it's quite useless, it was a clever way of saying it exists for itself and by itself. If it exists to fulfill some purpose, then that's something less than art. And that's why Guru Maharaj invokes Hegel. If reality exists to fulfill the purpose of another, then it's not for itself and by itself. So we're back to this means of revelation, of divine expression, of Krishna, you know, Nimitta Matra Bhavasavya Sachin, Arjun, you can be an instrument for the expression of my divine will. That, so it's whether you're Arjun on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, or you're an artist in front of a canvas, or a devotee giving a lecture. The aspiring servitor is offering themselves as an instrument to be used for divine expression.
But some people may say, acting in a particular frame of religion, or a particular frame of philosophical school, it's not entirely the same as to be a pure artist, where you have no bridges, you have no limit, you just surrender yourself to some kind of a divine flow, and that will let you represent itself. So how would you apply that?
Well, ultimately we have to examine, we can say anything.
Well, I mean, many people would say,
they can say, I'm saying,
art
so
is a slave of religion.
Well,
so now where the art is separate from religion, they can be more true, sincere, and honest than being honest.
And produce lower quality art. You know? So to this day, they can't produce something that matches one of these masters under the influence of theism. That's another subject. But what I'm saying, we can say anything, but whether it's true or not is another thing. So wait, so what is that, instead of dealing in nebulous terms about being moved by the Spirit and expressing something, right? Why is one artwork selling for 100 million euros and the other one for 100, right? So those who are, subjective experts, they're determining value, and they have some criteria for doing that. So in a similar way, we have to have some idea about what is that reality, what is the nature of that or reality who's going to express himself through a particular agent. Is the ultimate reality something impersonal, abstract? Is it personal? Is it multidimensional? Can it be impersonal, localized, and superpersonal? All these things will have to be considered. Otherwise, if we just say, well, it's some divine, abstract thing that is moving me to express these things, how can that be verified?
Well, my question is very similar to almost Vedic approach, as a spontaneous divine revelation, as artistic approach, as true pure art, as spontaneous divine revelation. So,
and revealing what? That's the point. It all sounds good. Then what is revealed? What is the substance of what is revealed?
well, in both ways, we can say
That's why in Vedic culture, let's just put this out there also, visual arts are in the lower section of society done by artisans and craftsmen. The higher section of society, Brahmins, who are dealing with Shabda Brahma, spiritual sound, they're not visual, they don't do visual representations. They're the artist, the actor, all of those positions in Vedic culture are in the lower section of society.
Why?
Well, I think it's very obvious because they're external. For the most part.